Animals in the wild face a lot of challenges to ensure their survival. They have to hunt or forage for food, seek or build shelters, weather everything that nature throws their way, and actively tend to their packs or herds if they want to protect their progeny. It's a cutthroat life, and any interaction with another creature is usually a matter of life or death.
Before we begin, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos.
Domesticated animals, on the other hand, don't need to rely on their instincts as much. They've got a warm bed to sleep in, an endless supply of food, and friends, whether they're the furry or human kind. But every once in a while, our pets can't help but draw on their ancestors' wild tendencies, and it often leads them into some very tricky and hilarious situations. Just take this kitty, for instance. Some house cats are born hunters. Be it an insect inside of the home or a bird or squirrel just out of reach beyond the window panes, felines can't help their natural instinct to chase and hunt down prey. Of course, no house cat truly needs to do this. With a warm bed and a full food dish, they've got everything they need to survive, no instincts necessary. Tammy Simpson's cat, Ginger, seemed to accept this wholeheartedly. Not only had she never indicated any desire to hunt, but Tammy said that Ginger didn't even know how to do it. She hasn't figured out how to hunt, Tammy said, despite the fact that she's 7 years old. Thankfully, Ginger's lack of hunting ability has never really bothered her owner. Her kitty always made it clear she preferred lazing around to pouncing. According to Tammy, Ginger also suffered from serious anxiety. Whenever Tammy moved furniture or used the vacuum cleaner, or if a guest made a sudden movement, Ginger would fly into an absolute panic. She didn't exactly have the demeanor to stalk anything. And that was all fine by Tammy. She adopted Ginger for companionship, not for her mouse hunting skills, so she didn't mind that Ginger shirked her natural instincts in favor of domesticated life. I was very sick for a very long time. You know, people exhausted me, said Tammy. Ginger likes to cuddle, and so cats are good healing companions. So that was why it was so surprising to Tammy when Ginger began to develop an interest in something outside, moose. The gigantic creatures would sometimes show up in Tammy's Alaskan backyard, and Ginger seemed fascinated by them. She even meowed to be let outside when a mother moose and her calf appeared. Now, moose don't typically go out of their way to target people or other animals, but they can be territorial, especially when provoked. If a moose spotted a dog or a cat and thought they were behaving like a predator, they can become quite aggressive and charge, causing injury or death. Tammy knew this, and she was hesitant to let Ginger outside for her own safety. But the cat was so insistent that Tammy eventually caved. She watched carefully as Ginger faced off against the moose and her calf. It was almost as if Ginger was stalking them. Thankfully, the mama moose didn't seem to mind. Their first encounter was so successful that Tammy felt comfortable letting Ginger wander near them. If I pointed out to her, if I'm like, hey, there's a moose, she's out on the deck ready to watch them, Tammy said. Tammy said that as soon as Ginger spotted the moose, all she wanted to do was go outside and investigate. Ginger became so comfortable around her new friends that she began to inch closer to them every time they stopped by. One day, Ginger became a bit too curious. She moved closer to the moose, who then stood up. The moment the ginormous mother moose began to approach the curious cat, Ginger seemed to have second thoughts. She quickly scampered back to the safety of the house. Still, Ginger didn't give up, and she kept perfecting her hunting skills. After that, she was even more curious about the moose family when 2 calves appeared alongside the mother. Tammy loved watching Ginger become braver, but each visit also made her nervous. If the moose felt at all threatened, this kitty would be in huge trouble. Ginger might not have been the best hunter, but she certainly knew how to make an entrance. She'd start off by charging down the hill toward the moose. That might have seemed like an aggressive move, but the mother and her babies seemed more content to make friends than anything else. Tammy believed that the mother moose left Ginger alone because she could sense how excited Ginger was to interact with them, especially the babies. It seems like when there are babies, in particular, she likes to head out there, said Tammy. While Ginger made huge strides in overcoming her anxiety, the moose and her babies also got an incredible opportunity to socialize with a creature outside their species. It certainly made for an unusual experience. That was because mother animals are usually very aggressive toward anyone or anything approaching their calves. Young moose are very vulnerable, confirmed Jesse Coltrane from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. The maternal instinct to protect their offspring is stronger at certain times of the year, too. While that might be the case with most moose, it definitely was not the case here. This was one mama moose who was just fine with Ginger. "She's not bothering them," Tammy said. "Like, I've never seen the moose get really upset. Even once there were 2 calves, she just didn't care." To Tammy, none of that was unusual. While Ginger might not have been much of a hunter, she did have her own particular quirks. She likes to put paper in her water dish and just kind of move it around. She also loves hanging out in the sink, said Tammy. Ginger also had some funny ways of asking for attention, too. "She won't meow or anything," said Tammy. "She'll get really close to your face, and just stare. And eventually, it wakes you up, like you can sense something's there. It's very terrifying, it makes me jump every time." For such a scaredy cat, she sure seemed assertive. Meanwhile, Ginger and the moose family continued to enjoy a very special bond. While they made for an odd couple, there was no denying that they truly enjoyed being around each other's company, even if Ginger tried to hunt the moose at first.
If you enjoyed this story, wait for our next story starting in 10 seconds.
As much as we'd like for our beloved pets to live forever, that's never the case. And even though we do everything we can to keep them healthy so they can enjoy a long life, sometimes, when the situation is dire, the best thing we can do is just ensure that they're comfortable in the end. That was the mission of one family in Ankara, Turkey, who volunteered at their local animal shelter where a number of dogs needed hospice care. And even though they spent countless shifts helping out, nothing could have ever prepared them for the puppy named Faith. The sad truth is that there are millions of dogs being crammed into shelters around the world. There are simply not enough resources or volunteers to help each and every dog in need, and sometimes shelters in poor areas even lack necessities like food and water for their animals. That's the reason why a woman named Mary and her 3 daughters decided to get involved with their local animal shelter after moving to Ankara, Turkey. They wanted to be the extra sets of hands the shelter so desperately needed. The local shelter was so overrun that at one point there were over 4,000 dogs in need of medical care, food, shelter, and love. The shelter workers just couldn't keep up and oftentimes ran out of food to feed the animals. So Mary and her 2 daughters started bringing food to help the dogs who needed it the most. They loved playing a part in the dogs' lives, but it was heartbreaking to know that some of them would pass away in such an uncomfortable setting. Mary decided she wanted to adopt the shelter dogs who were dying so that they could have the most comforting and loving end to their lives. This decision was one that changed her family's life forever, and in an unexpected way. Faith was one of 3 puppies in a litter the family took home. Sadly, the first 2 passed away shortly after they arrived. Given that Faith was the smallest puppy in her litter, the family prepared themselves for Faith's likely fate. Sure enough, Faith struggled immensely the first few days away from the shelter. She could barely walk because her legs were so weak, and she was suffering from distemper, a viral disease that affects many animals including dogs. Distemper affects many vital systems in a dog like the respiratory, gastrointestinal, and central nervous systems. The final stages of distemper affect the spinal cord, and it can cause seizures and loss of coordination. Life at the shelter and the disease really affected Faith. In fact, Faith was so weak that she seldom, if ever, left the box she had been brought to her new home in. She seemed so sick that she didn't want to do anything other than observe what was happening from the safety and security of her box. And yet, for reasons they couldn't explain, the family started to fall for little Faith. She wasn't the biggest or the healthiest puppy, and they knew she didn't have long to live, but she was winning them over. Nobody expected her to survive, but they were going to make her as comfortable as they possibly could anyway. The family could sense that she had a warm personality and loved affection. She closed her eyes when they stroked her fur and took in each and every second of it. One day, the family brought Faith to the vet to have her distemper evaluated. The vet wasn't sure if Faith was strong enough to survive any treatment, but he felt it was worth trying. Mary wanted to do anything possible to help Faith. Once we took her out of there and took her to our vet, they started care for the distemper, Mary recalled. Once she was eating regularly, she just started improving, and we took her home. Faith needed to be quarantined from Mary's other 3 chihuahuas even though they'd been vaccinated prior. The virus was still extremely dangerous and needed to be completely taken care of before introducing Faith to other animals. Mary's daughter's room became Faith's hospital room. Faith was in good hands because it was her daughter that first laid eyes on Faith and knew she wanted to help comfort this little pup. Even though they saw signs of improvement in Faith, the first month was touch and go. The only thing they could do was pray that the treatment was working and that Faith had enough fight left in her. A month passed and Faith seemed to have made a miraculous recovery. She was cleared by the vet and deemed a healthy dog. But although Faith had beat distemper, she still had one challenge ahead of her. She needed to learn to be a dog. Mary introduced Faith to her chihuahuas by just placing Faith's kennel in front of them and letting both parties feel each other out. They warmed up to one another fairly quickly, but now it was time for Faith to feel grass for the first time ever. Mary recalled, the girls would take her outside, and she would just kind of stand around. But it didn't take Faith long to learn because Mary constantly took care of street dogs in the area. Faith was soon running around and playing as a dog should. Faith made a full recovery and lived her best life with the family that saved her. Mary explained, "You can't help every single animal who's suffering, but for the ones that you can, you make a difference. That's how I look at it, and that's how my girls look at it."